The portal had been dead for 3 years. It hung in the middle of the test chamber like a gutted animal, its frame scorched and twisted from the last time someone dared to power it up. The walls around it still bore the faded black streaks from the explosion that followed. No one visited Lab 12 anymore unless they were ordered to clean it out or take inventory. But on a rainy Thursday morning, a man named Oren Ellery walked in with a half-eaten protein bar in his mouth and a duffel bag full of tools. He chewed as he flicked on the lights, squinting as the fluorescence buzzed to life overhead. "Still smells like fried copper and shame," he muttered, dropping the bag beside the control panel. Oren wasn't a physicist. He wasn't even supposed to be in this wing of the facility. But 3 weeks earlier, he overheard a pair of engineers in the cafeteria talking about an old portal prototype that nearly killed their department head. They described it as a black hole with ambition. Everyone assumed it failed because the math was wrong. Oren had read the math. The math was fine. The build was the problem. He wiped his hands on his pants and crouched beside the exposed circuitry. The wires had melted into a copper-colored sludge. He frowned, brushing at the brittle edges with a toothbrush. "You were never meant to handle a quantum thread this thin, were you?" he said under his breath. He spent the next 6 hours rebuilding the interface from scratch, connecting pieces of salvaged tech from a decommissioned comms relay. He didn't tell anyone what he was doing. He didn't ask for clearance. He just worked, occasionally muttering to himself and nodding like he was listening to someone who wasn't there. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, the portal frame pulsed faintly with power. Not fully active, just humming, like it remembered being alive. Oren grinned. That night, he didn't sleep. He returned with a cooling unit, rewired the field regulators, and replaced the damaged lensing rings with ones scavenged from an atmospheric lens array. He calibrated the core manually, sweating through his shirt as the system groaned and flickered. On the third night, he brought coffee and a fire extinguisher. "Just in case you try to kill me," he said, setting it down beside the console. He flipped the final switch and the portal shuddered. Light bled from its edges, soft at first, then sharp and white. A circular rift tore open inside the frame, crackling with unstable energy. Wind whipped through the lab, scattering papers and knocking over a stool. Oren stepped back and raised his arm to shield his face. The air smelled like ozone and burnt sugar. The portal stabilized. He stared at it, breathing hard. He hadn't expected it to work this soon. He hadn't expected it to work at all. A ripple passed through the frame, then another. The image beyond the portal shifted. At first, it showed only darkness, then stars. Then something that looked like a city-tall, curved structures floating in an atmosphere of green mist. He blinked. That's not Earth. He reached for the console to shut it down, but the panel sparked and spat smoke. The readouts scrambled. The energy levels spiked. No, the portal expanded beyond the frame, swelling like a bubble. Oren stumbled back, tripping over the fire extinguisher. A sharp, whining tone filled the chamber. The walls trembled. The floor beneath him cracked, then everything went white. He woke up on his back. The lab was gone. The sky above him was a smear of violet and gold. A dozen crescent moons hung in the sky, slowly rotating. The air was warm and heavy, and the ground beneath him felt like soft glass. Oren sat up slowly. Every joint in his body ached. His head throbbed. "What the hell?" he whispered. He stood, wincing as pain laced through his ankle. He tested it, probably a sprain but not broken. He limped forward, scanning the horizon. The landscape was alien. Trees shimmered with metallic leaves. Rivers ran uphill. The sky rippled like a heat mirage. He saw no buildings, no people. No familiar landmarks, no portal. He turned in a slow circle, but there was no sign of the frame or the lab. Just endless terrain that looked like it had been painted by a child with a vivid imagination and no rules. He was alone. Oren dropped to one knee, the weight of the situation crashing down on him. He hadn't just fixed the portal. He'd opened something, somewhere new. No, not somewhere. He looked up at the sky again. This place wasn't part of the known multiverse. There were no reference points. No matching star charts. It was too clean, too unformed. He hadn't traveled through a portal. He had created this place. 3 days passed. Oren rationed what little food he had. He built a shelter from tree bark and vines that pulsed faintly in the dark. He tried not to think about the fact that the plants here moved slightly when he wasn't looking at them. He charted the terrain, marked his location using stones, and scratched notes into a flat piece of bark. He didn't sleep much. Not just because of the constant, low droning sound that seemed to come from the sky, but because he knew that if he died here, no one would ever know what happened. On the fourth day, he met the first native. It didn't walk so much as it hovered. Its body was translucent, like a jellyfish, and it changed color as it pulsed forward. It stopped a few feet away from him and emitted a low tone. Oren held up his hands. "Hey, easy, I'm not looking for trouble." The creature circled him slowly, inspecting. Then it projected a series of images into the air, a series of collapsing stars, a spiral of code, and finally, a crude image of a human. "Yeah, that's me," Oren said. The creature pulsed violet, then it showed him the image of the portal. Oren felt his stomach knot. "You know what that is." The creature floated closer and emitted another tone. This one was sharper. "What do you mean I broke it?" he said, backing up a step. "I fixed it." The creature flashed red. Okay, maybe not fixed exactly, more like, jump started. The ground vibrated slightly. A second creature appeared, then a third, all variations of the first but slightly different in color and shape. They formed a loose ring around him. Oren swallowed hard. "Look, I didn't mean to crash into your reality or whatever this is. I was trying to fix a portal back home. Something went wrong. I think I tore a hole into something that didn't exist yet." The first creature projected a new image. It was a sphere, a planet, but it wasn't Earth. It was this place. Then it zoomed out. The planet was the only object in the frame, no stars, no galaxies. Oren's chest tightened. He hadn't traveled to a new universe. He had created one, and he was the only thing anchoring it. By the end of the second week, Oren had made temporary peace with the creatures. They didn't speak, but they communicated through images and sound patterns. He called the first one Vec. It was the only one that didn't change color when it approached. Vec taught him how to eat the local fruit. Only the orange-skinned ones were safe. The blue ones made him hallucinate for 2 days. He learned that the rivers were full of microorganisms that could either heal wounds or cause instant paralysis depending on the phase of the moons. He learned this the hard way after a shallow cut on his arm became infected. Vec led him to a hot spring that steamed with green mist. After soaking for an hour, the swelling went down. The pain faded. Still, he missed antibiotics. He missed silence. The universe was growing slowly. He could feel it. The sky had changed. Stars began to appear, not many, just a few pinpricks at night, but they hadn't been there before. He didn't know how it was happening, only that it was tied to him. One night, Vec showed him an image of the portal frame, then an image of it collapsing, then a new one forming, but different, organic. Oren sat up. "You're saying I can make another one?" Vec pulsed green. "But how?" Vec showed him an image of himself standing in a field concentrating. "That's not helpful." Vec repeated the image. Oren rubbed his eyes. "You want me to build it with my mind?" Vec pulsed again. He sighed. "Sure, why not? I created a universe by accident." "What's a little telekinetic engineering?" He tried the next morning. He stood in a clearing and focused on the memory of the portal, the shape, the sound, the hum. He pictured it whole, stable. For hours, nothing happened. Then the air shimmered. A ring of light formed, hovering above the ground. It crackled, unstable. The ground split beneath it. Oren fell back. Vec and the others gathered around him. He tried again the next day. And the next. Each time the portal grew more stable. Each time it lasted a little longer. After a week, it held for 10 full seconds before collapsing with a thunderclap. He was making progress. And then, on the 23rd day, it stayed open. Oren stepped forward, heart pounding. The image beyond the ring was blurry, but he recognized the silhouette of Lab 12's control panel. He turned to Vec. "I can go home." Vec pulsed yellow. Oren hesitated. This universe was young, it was growing, but it was tied to him if he left. He looked up at the stars, dozens now. He turned back to the portal. "I'll come back," he said. Then he stepped through. Oren's knees hit the cold tile before his mind caught up. The hum of fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the chemical tang of sterilized metal bit at his nose. He blinked hard. The portal behind him evaporated into a thin wisp of golden static, leaving behind nothing but a faint scorch where it had hovered. The lab was less ruined than he remembered, though a third of the ceiling panels lay scattered on the floor, and something had melted through one of the walls. Still, it was home, or close enough. He coughed once, then twice. His lungs felt tighter than they should have, like the air was too dry or too fast. He tried to stand but stumbled sideways into an overturned cart. Pain flared in his ribs, sharp and immediate. Yep. That's broken. He reached under his shirt and pressed gently along his side. 2 ribs, maybe 3, shifted in a way that made his stomach lurch. He gritted his teeth and reached for the nearest wall panel to steady himself. Outside the chamber, alarms stayed silent. No red lights. No security drones bursting in. Either no one was watching this lab anymore, or the system had given up trying to monitor it. The hallway looked longer than it had any right to be. He leaned against the wall, dragged 1 foot forward, then the next. Each breath sent a fresh jab of pain through his chest. His ankle protested with every step, but at least it held his weight. Halfway to the elevator, he collapsed onto a bench bolted into the wall and pulled a roll of gauze from the emergency medkit he'd stuffed in his jacket weeks ago. He wrapped it tight around his ribs, winding with one arm while biting down on the tail of the fabric. It wasn't perfect, but it kept things from moving too much. He sat there for a long while. Eventually, the pain numbed into something dull and manageable. He forced himself up again and limped the rest of the way. The elevator groaned as it descended. The lights flickered once but held when the doors opened. A woman holding a clipboard nearly walked straight into him. Jesus, your weight, who the hell are you? Oren squinted at her. Ellery. Maintenance, I think I'm overdue for a tetanus shot. She took a step back, her badge read Dr. K. Neiman. She didn't lower the clipboard. You're Oren Ellery. You went missing 23 days ago. Feels longer, he muttered. You were presumed dead. They ran a search. They even flew in a team from Geneva. They found blood, scorch marks, and half of Lab 12's ceiling embedded in the hallway wall. Yeah, sorry about the ceiling. There was a complication. She stared at him. Where have you been? Hard to explain. Might involve accidentally generating a self-sustaining dimension and forming diplomatic relations with what may be sentient bioplasmic organisms. Also, I think I invented stars. Another long pause. Right, you need to see Director Kwan. I need water and antibiotics. Maybe a sandwich, if that's still a thing. 10 minutes later, Oren sat on a rolling stool in the infirmary while a nurse who refused to stop muttering under her breath stitched up a gash on his shoulder. Your vitals are a mess, she snapped. You've got a bacterial load I can't even identify, elevated cortisol through the roof, and your blood pressure's bouncing like a ping-pong ball. Didn't pack a first aid kit when I left, he said, wincing as she yanked the thread tight. You've been exposed to something. Your immune markers are off the charts. I've never seen T cells mutate that fast. Side effect of new universe creation, maybe. She stopped stitching. Say that again. Nothing, I'm sure it's fine. She went back to work, muttering louder this time. The director's office was 2 floors up, past 3 security checkpoints and a retinal scan. Oren limped through all of them with the enthusiasm of someone who would rather be unconscious. Director Kwan didn't look up from her terminal when he entered. Her office was the only room in the facility with natural light, a narrow window that showed just enough sky to remind you the world still existed above the ground. You're not supposed to be alive, she said. Neither was that portal. Yet here we are. She tapped a few keys, then turned the screen toward him. A still image showed the portal frame moments before it activated the glow around it, the stretch of space as it warped. You triggered a breach event. It overloaded every sensor in the complex. We lost telemetry for 6 minutes. When it stabilized, you were gone. I didn't go through it. I think it formed around me. She narrowed her eyes. Explain. Oren took a deep breath, then regretted it. The portal wasn't broken. It was incomplete. The failure wasn't in the math. It was in the interface. I patched it with a relay system from an old array, used the phase harmonics to reinforce the threading. I didn't account for recursive feedback. She blinked slowly. You're saying it collapsed inward. No, I'm saying it folded outward. It didn't connect to another universe. It built one. He waited for the laughter or at least a raised eyebrow. Neither came. Kwan folded her hands. Describe it. Empty at first, then it started to form as I stayed. Landscape, atmosphere, life, it wasn't pulling from anywhere. It was extrapolating from observation. You're saying it was reacting to you, more than that. It was tethered. I think I was the central node. The longer I stayed, the more it developed, and not randomly. It was responsive, curious. She stood, walked to the window, and the breach signature. That burst of energy was it stable, eventually. Took about 3 weeks to hold a portal open long enough for transit. To here, he nodded. Then it's still open on the other side. Assuming it didn't collapse when I left, yes. She turned. We need to send a probe. No, Oren said sharply. It's not a test site, it's alive. She didn't flinch. So are most ecosystems. That doesn't stop us from exploring them. Look, I don't care what protocol says. You shove a drone into that place and it's going to notice. It's not passive. It remembers, it learns. That's speculation. It rebuilt a portal for me. That stopped her. He leaned forward. You don't understand. It didn't just recreate the tech, it interpreted it, reimagined it. It built something based on how I thought it should work. This time, Quan sat down. You're not describing a universe, she said. You're describing a sentient substrate. It's more than that. It's not just aware, it's adaptive. It didn't exist until I activated the portal, and now it's evolving. She was silent for a time, then gestured toward the door. Get some rest. We'll talk tomorrow. Oren didn't argue. He was asleep before he hit the bed in the observation suite. The next morning, he woke to find a visitor waiting. It wasn't human. The thing stood in the center of the room, slightly translucent, with a faint violet glow pulsing beneath its skin. It had no legs, no eyes, no visible mouth. It just hovered completely still. Vec, the shape flickered, then shifted color. Oren sat up slowly, heart pounding. The portal had closed behind him. There was no reason they shouldn't have been able. The creature projected an image into the air, Oren standing in the field. Then another him stepping through the portal, then a third, a crack, not in the ground, not in the sky, in the fabric of the creature's world. Oren's mouth went dry. It's unraveling. The creature pulsed once. He stood, ignoring the pain. It needs an anchor. The creature showed one more image, a second portal, already forming. Oren looked at the door, then the creature. Tell Quan nothing goes through that gate, nothing. The creature didn't move. Oren breathed in slowly. I'm going back. The second portal bloomed open like a wound in the center of the old chamber, and this time they knew better than to leave it unattended. Oren sat at the edge of the observation platform, both feet dangling over the railing, watching the ring of light ripple. His ribs ached under the compression vest, and the bruising on his ankle had deepened to a sickly yellow, but he was stable. Stable enough to walk, and more importantly stable enough to return. The alien Vec, or at least another of the same kind, hadn't left his side since appearing in the facility 2 days ago. It hovered silently, maintaining a polite distance, but never drifted far. It hadn't displayed anything resembling impatience, but when Oren delayed the departure by another hour to recalibrate the stabilizers, the creature's glow dimmed slightly. He took that as a nudge. He glanced over his shoulder. You sure about this? The creature projected a brief glimmer in the air, a collapsing valley, a field of silver grass curling inward like paper in a fire. Then blackness. Right, so no time for second guesses. He stood slowly, wincing as his ankle protested. The support brace under his pants held, but the stiffness hadn't faded. Dr. Neiman stood by the console, scanning the portal's energy flicker. 37 minutes before cycle decay. If you're going, go, Oren nodded. If I don't come back, you know what to do. She didn't look up from the display. I know exactly what not to do. The creature drifted forward. Oren followed. Stepping through the portal was less dramatic this time. No burst of light, no howling wind. Just a cold rush, like walking into a freezer. Then warmth, sudden and cloying. He stumbled onto a familiar slope, his foot sinking slightly into the translucent soil. His knees buckled and he landed on one hand. The pressure sent a jolt through his ribs. The portal behind him sealed shut with a low pop. He exhaled slowly, letting the pain fade to a dull throb. The sky above was darker than before, fewer moons. The stars had rearranged. He recognized none of them. To his right, the terrain had split open. A long fracture ran across the plain, glowing faintly at the edges like a cauterized wound. He hadn't caused that, not directly. The creature beside him pulsed once, then moved forward. They walked for what felt like an hour. The air smelled different, less like sugar, more like heated stone. The vegetation had changed too. The metallic trees from before were now covered in soft, fibrous growths that twitched as he passed. Eventually, they reached a basin he didn't remember. In the center stood a structure tall, narrow, and glistening. Not quite organic, not quite mechanical. It resembled a spire made of hardened sap and glass, and it hummed with a low, rhythmic vibration. Around it hovered more of the creatures, at least 30. They parted as Oren approached, their colors shifting through a spectrum he couldn't name. The original Vec emerged from the spire, hovering lower than the others. It pulsed a deep blue as it approached. "I wasn't sure you'd still be here," Oren said. Vec projected a series of images in rapid succession. Oren walking away, the spire dark, the sky dimming. Then his return and the spire lighting up again. "You weren't just waiting, you were holding it together." Vec showed a slow, unraveling threads of the world pulling apart at the seams, then a core stabilizing, wrapping the threads back into place. Oren nodded. "I get it." "I'm the tether." He looked around at the gathered creatures. "Why me, though? There's a whole lab full of people back home, scientists, engineers, people who actually know what they're doing." Vec responded with a single image. Oren hunched over the broken portal, hands covered in grease, stuffing a toothbrush into a melted circuit. "That's not comforting." The creature pulsed again. Humor, maybe. He stepped closer to the spire. The hum grew louder. Inside the structure, he saw shapes moving slow, fluid, like reflections in water. Information. Memory. "Can you show me what's wrong?" Vec projected a new sequence. The spire was a conduit connected to the fabric of the dimension. But the thread, the original one that had anchored the portal, had frayed. When Oren left, the thread snapped. The dimension didn't collapse, but it began to decay inward, like muscles starving without a heartbeat. "So I need to reattach it. But how?" Vec didn't answer. Instead, it floated to the spire and pressed its form against the surface. The structure responded immediately, lighting up in bands that spiraled upward. Oren stepped forward and placed his hand on the base. A jolt ran up his arm, not painful, but sharp enough to make him gasp. Images flooded his vision. The first moment he activated the portal, the way the universe had unfolded around him, the creatures forming in the haze of thought and light. The connection had never been mechanical. It had been intuitive, thought-driven, will-bound. He pulled his hand back. "I have to stay." Vec pulsed gently. Oren sat down in the grass, ignoring the pain in his ribs. "All right. But I'm not just going to sit here and be a battery. If I'm anchoring this place, I'm shaping it too." He closed his eyes. He thought of the rivers that defied gravity, the trees that shimmered. He thought of animals none of which he'd seen and imagined them in the distance. Herds of tall, spiral-legged grazers, birds with translucent wings that could hum at different frequencies. He thought of the sky, and he added constellations patterns he could use to navigate. The air shifted. When he opened his eyes, the stars above had aligned into shapes. The grass around him had grown softer. A breeze had returned. The creatures pulsed together like a choir tuning itself. Vec projected one last image. Oren seated at the spire, the world stable, the thread reconnected. Oren leaned back, resting his head against the grass. "You should have picked someone who liked responsibility." Another pulse, he laughed, then winced. "All right, I'll call the shots. But we're doing this my way." The spire's hum deepened. The fracture across the plain began to seal, the glowing lines knitting together like skin. He watched it close fully, the last trace of instability vanishing. Then he lay back and let the universe breathe. It was no longer unraveling. It was learning how to stand on its own.